Here we are again, folks. This is Brother Peter with tidbits from the Word. So proud to be with you today. We're still in 1 Peter, and we're going through, and there's just 5 chapters in this little book. But this little book is like a stick of dynamite. Once you set it on fire, when it blows a big hole in a space of Christianity for how to live properly as a husband and a wife, as a Christian on this earth, as a person who one time was lost, one time did everything the world did, and now Jesus has saved you, and now you are learning how to live in a spiritual manner. And this is a very, very important thing. Starting with verse 7, speaking now to the husbands, we had spoke in the previous excerpt, which was excerpt 8. We spoke to the wives, the female part of a marriage system in a household. By the way, it is important that we look at things as when it's a family. It's the husband is the head of the house. The wife is second, the children are third. If all are put in their place properly, we can have what's called a happy family. But very, very, very few happy families in America today. The happy families you'll find today, the bulk of them would be in country folk, somewhere out in the country, where they're still working for their own living, they're still making their own way, and the children are still obedient. The children still work in gardens, working things, and the children are part of the system, not just put on the side. And not, I tell you what, you meet a family today that is outside of the cell phone, and you'll meet a family today that is probably more than likely a happy family. They're living amongst each other. They're happy with each other. Their fellowship is with each other, not on the phone with somebody else. It's very, I think it's very rude. 4 or 5 people go to eat dinner today together, and they all got cell phones, and 2 or 3 of them are talking conversations with other people while you're out eating. You're supposed to be fellowshipping together. And instead of shutting the phone off, you leave the phone on, and everybody is calling you, and you've got carrying on everything but what you're supposed to be doing. And that's the way the family has gone today. A child can't talk to his mother and father for the telephone. Nowadays, ladies are cooking supper or cooking a meal, and they've got their phone set up there, and while they're cooking the meal, they're not talking to this little child under their feet. They're saying actually to the child, I'm on the phone, I'm on the phone, I'm on the phone, showing that child that the phone is more important than that child is. If you want to know the truth, there's a child right in the middle of the family being left alone, being left to raise its own self while mama's on the telephone, gibbering, jabbering, some kind of nonsense that really doesn't mean a thing, but the child is important. The day of picking the child up and setting him on the table or on the bench and speaking to the child and saying, hey, I'm going to chop up some cabbage, I'm making coleslaw. Do you think that child won't remember mama making coleslaw? Yes. But she's not ever going to remember anything except mama being on the telephone if mama doesn't teach the child. And fathers, now we're talking in verse 7 to fathers. Likewise, ye husbands, dwell with them according to knowledge, giving honor unto the wife as unto the weaker vessel, and absorbing as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. Man, let me tell you something. God said if you're not right with your wife, your prayers are going to be hindered. Why? Because now you are a union. Now you are a union. I want to show you a physical picture of how your prayers can be hindered. Here you are, you're a man, and you got 2 hands. And you're out carpentering. And you mash that thumb right there so bad that you have to go to the doctor and get a metal splint put on it and wrap your hand half up, and you got a metal splint on that thumb. You tell me until that thing is healed and comes off that you're not impaired. Yes, you're impaired. And you're impaired bad. You're impaired bad. It could even cause you not to be able to work, depending on what kind of job you have. And the pain is wicked. That's like a broken marriage. A marriage where a husband does not give benevolence to his wife. Did you know that that woman is your crown, mister? The woman that you have is your crown. When you go out of the house and you and your wife and you get in the car and you ride down, this is your crown riding with you. You remember when you were young, you wanted to show her off and everything. Now that you're old, do the same thing. I love my wife's gray hair. I love her hair. I love it long, hanging down, streaming down her back. There is no question, none, in my mind, when I look at my wife from the back that she's a woman. There is no question from her hairdo and everything, she is a woman. And she is my crown. She's still my crown, physically speaking. Now, how do you adorn your wife? If you adorn your wife as you do God, now when you go out in the public, you go out as a Christian couple. My wife is still chaste. She is still under my authority. Does, after being married 53 years, does she take some time, a little liberty, a little above what the woman normally would? Yes. Do I give her that credence in that room? Yes. She's earned it. She stayed with this old ugly man for 53 years. I have not always been a good husband. I have not always been a good father. I have not always been a good man or a good person. And still, as far as the sinful side, I'm not. But the Christian side, as I allow God to live through me and in me, I'm able to develop my life and keep my life together and keep my wife and I together and enjoy life together. Now, likewise, he said the same words to the man as he said to the woman, in a big sense of the word. You know, women adorn themselves and men adorn themselves with their wife. Their wife is their adorning. And you know how when she first became your girlfriend and you took her out and all the fellas said, "Woo-wee, Pete, you got you a spoofy little girl there, ain't you?" I remember when she was a little old girl. I was a little old boy in a sense of the word. I was a little more knowledgeable in the world than she was, and captured her. And I got to be honest with you. I got to really, really be honest with you. I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that the woman I married was the woman God planned for me to marry the day I was born. And the man she married was the man God planned for her to marry the day she was born. If you could go through the last 3 years of my life before I ended up with this girl as my girlfriend and then my wife, the steps that were ordered by the Lord took me from on the high seas, working on a boat, to the state of Florida, down through to Virginia, from Norfolk, Virginia to New Hampshire, New Hampshire to Maine, and Maine to a job where this girl was living in a town, and she ended up working for me, and she ended up being my wife. Now, all of that was ordered, all of those steps were ordered by the Lord. Did you think so then? No, I didn't think so then. I was a drunk. Even then, I was a sneak drinker. Even then, I was a sneak drinker. I drank pretty religiously. I drank and became an alcoholic, actually. And for 15 years, I was not a good person. I was an alcoholic. It was a hard life for my wife, hard life for my children, hard life for everybody around me. And but God delivered me from that. And verse 8, finally, be ye all of one mind, having compassion one to another, love as brethren, be pitiful, be courteous. Wow. Finally, he's saying, on this weaker vessel, we've got some age on us now. We have a man at our church that does marriage matter classes. They're very good classes. And he talks about snuggling with each other, hugging each other, like when you get in bed, and snuggling up with each other. And do you know something? If you're not careful, when you get to a certain age, and your desires aren't the same as they were when you're young, that you do not snuggle. You need to snuggle with your wife and your husband. You need to keep the bond of each other's closeness bodily. Bodily. If you do not keep that, it will show up in your life, out in the physical life, outside of your marriage bed and outside of your marriage bedroom, outside of your house. It will show up. So you need to keep your closeness. You need to keep your arm around your wife's shoulder and her around your waist, and you need to keep that closeness with each other, just like you do with God. And he's saying, see, Peter's talking here about how important it is for us physically to appear as we do spiritually, that we keep close to God. That as I'm walking, I go out of the house and I'm walking, I know God's in my heart, but his hand's also on my shoulder. When people meet me, I want them to see me, and then I want them to see my spirit. And I want them to see the Spirit of God with me. I don't just want them to see it, I want them to feel it. When I start talking with a person about the Lord, I want their head to stand up. I want them to know they're in the presence of Almighty God through me. That he lives so in me that they can feel his presence. You have to live, as Peter said, to do. We went from 2:11 to 3:12. In verse 12, we're going to get there in a second. Let me go 10. For he that will love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil and his lips, that they speak no guile. Let him issue evil and do good. Let him seek peace and ensure it. For the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, and his ears are upon unto their prayers, but the face of the Lord is against them that do evil. You can do evil against your wife. Peter's talking about a marriage right here. But he's saying what you do in your marriage, more than likely, is what you do with the rest of the world. If you're disdain in your marriage, you're probably disdain in the rest of the world. And he's saying, you and your wife are one. How can you expect me to be in the middle if you're not in your union you're supposed to be in with your wife? He said when you got married, you became one. that means that she is just as important to you as your right arm is, or your left arm, if you're right or left arm, whichever arm you use the most. She is as important as that. She's as important as your right leg. When you get a leg cut off and you can't get a prosthesis or anything, you have to use crutches. So when you're walking, you got both hands and your one leg tied up. You're actually in a tough position until you really learn how to use your crutches and have them under your arms and use your hands too and your leg, like you do if you got both legs and both arms. And that's the way marriage is. Marriage is today very impaired. They're very lopsided. The man is a hellion and hard to live with. I was down next door this weekend wanting to retrieve some children. And their daddy is such a hellion that it's hard to get the children. And it's hard for the wife. And this man is at his wit's end following the devil when he knows that God has drawn him. And he knows that God is drawing him. So we need to suffer. Verse 13, and who is that will harm you if ye be followers of that which is good? Did you know that people would say to me, to Brother Peter, they would say, hey, do you have any enemies? Well, I hope not. Is everybody a friend? I hope so. I want everybody to be a friend. I want the worst cusser down the street right here. He's my friend. And he's a pretty good friend. He doesn't come visit my house, but I go visit his house. And as I visit his house and sit by him, he curbs some of his language. Now, he didn't used to at all, but now he curbs some of it. And he respects the fact that I am a Christian, that I follow the Lord. And he respects the fact that I respect my wife. Now, you remember, Peter's using husbands and wives as a scenario of how we ought to be in the world, how we ought to be with other people, how we ought to treat other people. We ought to treat them like we do our wife. We ought to treat them good and kind. What would aggravate my wife is if I treat somebody outside of her better than I treat her. Well, I see that. I see a man cuss his wife and then go out and treat another woman like she was the Queen of Sheba. He'd lay the royal carpet out for her. And then his wife, he'd sweep her under the carpet. Hey, we have lost what God made to be the best institution there ever was. Adam and Eve were the first married couple. They started the marriage thing. They started the marriage bed. They started the procreation of people. And they made the first people when they made Cain and Abel. One showed up evil, the other one showed up righteous. And we've got to, the only way he was righteous is his sacrifice was correct. If our sacrifice is correct, we are righteous. Verse 16, having a good conscience, that whereas they speak evil of you as of evildoers, they may be ashamed that falsely accuse you of good conversation in Christ. Now, if I have good conversation in Christ, what is your conversation? We covered conversation back in the woman's, when we were talking about the woman being obedient to her husband and the woman making a good home life and everything. We talked about this conversation. When the Bible talks about conversation, it's not necessarily talking about what comes out of the mouth. He's talking about your way of living. Do you think that my wife would go out of this house looking like a hag? No. She's got to do her hair up. She's got to get her nice looking clothes on. She's got to change 3 times before she goes out. She's got to double check her shoes twice and make sure that she feels like she's presentable to the world. And you know, by doing that, that is a glorification of her husband. That she wants to do that not just for the world, but for her husband. She wants the world to know that her husband's got a wife that thinks about how she looks and whatever. Now, this same conversation that she uses physically, my wife uses spiritually. She reads her Bible in the morning. She prays. She talks to God. She's in communion with the Lord. She watches over some of the money, the finances. I know that's the man's job, but the woman there can be more careful sometimes than a man is. And she makes sure that we have the tax money at the end of the year for taxes. She makes sure of some things that the husband would let slip and be in trouble. And so we have to be careful. We've got a good wife to treat her properly. Now, Christ also hath once suffered for sin. The just suffer for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but quickened by the Spirit. Now, spiritually, I was wicked, lost in sin. God came along and saved me. Physically, as a single man, I would have self-destructed. Peter's talking to husbands and wives here, seeing that it's very important for the husband and wife to be that one union and stay that one union. Just for instance, yesterday we were commissioned to work at the church for the whole day. I'm not talking about a little day. I'm talking about getting down there in the morning at work time, 7:30, 8 o'clock, and last night, and get home last night until 10:30, and work from 8 in the morning to 10:30 at night. Wife right by my side, working too, getting ready for a program that we do at our church. But it's very important that those others in the church, the younger group, the younger people, and some of the older people who do not do as such, can see a family union, can see a husband and a wife who agree 100% that God's work is necessary. This very day, the day that it is, it's I don't know what day it is, it's the 4th. We're going headed back down there early this morning. We got chairs to stack. We got things to move. We got stuff that if 15 people showed up, it would all be done in 2.5 hours, and that'd be the end of it. But 15 people aren't going to show up. There's only going to be a handful show up, and this is what God is trying to say to us through Peter. If you're in the church like you need to be, and you've got your wife under subjection, and she loves you, and you love her, and you're willing to treat each other like you should, you're going to be side by side. She's going to be there with you if it's any way possible. And my wife's been with me now 53 years, and she's always been the worker in the church. Always been the nursery worker for over 40 years now. She's been in the nursery, taking care of kids, knitting blankets for the kids that are born in the church. And she's a spiritual woman. And excuse me for having to stick my head in here, but I can't read. My eyes will not let me see red. And for some reason, my system is on red instead of black. And I know nothing about a computer except to sit in front of it. That's all I know. And I do not know how to change those to black so I can see them. All right. Christ's ministry on earth is just like the ministry of a husband and a wife. Now he is the husbandman of a vine. He has a vine. His vine is a spiritual vine. In order for you to go to heaven, you must say, Jesus, I am a sinner. Forgive me of my sin. Come into my heart and save my soul. And when you do that, you're in the vine. Now, if you're in the vine, you won't be cut off and cast out. If you are just a worker in the church, if you are a person that lives with a woman without a marriage ring, you're in trouble. Serious, serious trouble. You need to make that thing positive immediately. You need to put a ring on her finger immediately. You say, but look, I was in a marriage before, and if I marry this woman, I'm going to have to take on all kinds of stuff and everything. Well, you can live outside of God and live miserable. Your only happiness is going to be physical happiness. And that physical happiness is going to come to naught one day. And when it does, you're going to be in a worse shape than you were before you got into this situation. A man that has a wife and is living in a house with another woman is an adulterer. The Bible said no adulterers will enter into the kingdom of heaven. You say, but Brother Peter, I'm saved. Do you know when I got saved, God showed me what sin was? He showed me what adultery was. He showed me that for me to say I'm a Christian, I'm going to follow God, and I'm going to be a preacher, that it was an adulterous act for me to smoke cigarettes. It was an adulterous act for me to drink alcohol. It's an adulterous act for me to lie, steal, and cheat, do the same things I did before I got saved. It's called a spiritual adultery. And God won't put up with it. And physical adultery, God won't put up with it. You're headed into great trouble. You are headed into a great storm. Mister, you say, well, I've got a house and she's got a house and we can't iron all this out yet. If you think that the union that you've got is a union that God would honor, get rid of one of them houses. Sell both of them and get one together. Yes, you've had mistakes in life. Yes, you've got separated from your wife. She's got separated from her husband. If you're going to make the best out of life, get rid of everything both of you all got and start over. Sell it all. Put that money in one account with both names on it and say this is ours. And we're going to start over, ours. And we're going to get another house. And we're going to rent a place. We're going to do something. We're going to leave everything we had behind, put it all behind us, and we're going to start over again. If you do that, and you do it properly, and you work on it daily, you can end up with something that's good. You keep going the way you are, and you can't prove that you're saved and live that way. Are you truly saved? Are you truly saved? If you're truly saved, you can't live in known sin. You just can't do it. Verse 13. And who is he that will harm you if you follow, if you be followers of that which is good? Who can harm you if you're following that which is good? If you're not following that which is good, you can be harmed. You can even be harmed by God. But and if you suffer for righteousness' sake, happy are ye. And be not afraid of their terror, neither be troubled. 15, verse 15. But sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and be ready always to give an answer to every man that asks you a reason of the hope that is in you with meekness and fear. You cannot prove to your neighbor that you're God's child and live in a house with a woman you're not married to. Woman, you cannot prove to your children, to your family, to your preacher, or to anybody in this world, that you are a child of God, doing as God would have you do, and live with a man you're not married to. You could say to me, Brother Peter, I live in a house, we live in a house together. He has his bedroom, I have my bedroom, and we don't get together, not going to until we get married. Well, you'd think I have a hole in my head if I'm going to believe that. Well, I don't have a hole in my head, and by the way, the world doesn't either. They see you living under the same roof, they got the same opinion. Our time's come and gone. Our 30 minutes is up. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.